ईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात्। ॐ 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 ईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात्।
Tapovanam, Sri Sathya Sai Satcharitra. The Sacred Life Story of Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba by Chandyala Venkateshwara Sastri, Day 2, Friday. Chapter 3, Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. I incarnate again and again. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanira bhavati bharata abhyuttanam adharmasya tadatmanam shrujamyaha. Paratranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadukshanam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 4, Verse 7.8. Buddhavardhani. The present-day village of Buddhavarthi was known in olden times as Golapalli, the village of cowards. The whole area was populated with cowards and their cows. One day a coward of the village noticed that one of his cows had returned from grazing fields with an empty udder. This continued to happen for the next several days. He decided to stalk her quietly to the fields to find out who might be stealing her milk. The cow went as usual to the woods with the keeper watching her every movement with peeled eyes. She approached a snake hill out of which emerged a wondrous serpent wound itself around the cow's hind legs and fed itself from the udder without hurting the cow. The cow had lost his temper. It did not occur to him that this serpent might be something uncommon or divine. He picked up a heavy stone and hurled it at the serpent. Blood flowed out and stained the stone. The serpent died. Ever since that incident, coward families of Golapalli gradually declined in numbers and serpent hills proliferated all over. People believed that the dying serpent cursed the villagers, which was the root cause of their misery. As time passed, Golapalli acquired the dubious distinction of being known as Puttavardhini, place where snake hills abound. The contrite villagers took the blood-stained stone which had killed the serpent, named it Gopalaswamy, Krishna the Coward, and installed it in the village for regular worship. The charming name of Krishna evokes the childhood pranks and amusing frolics of Lord Krishna, who grew up among cowards. As a boy, he playfully stole milk, butter, and curds to feed himself and his cohorts and playmates. The villagers worshipped the stone as Krishna, the coward, as an act of penitence and atonement. Soon enough, the village prospered and grew, and came to be known as Buddhabrati. During the reign of the great ruler Sri Krishna Deva Raya of the Vijayanagar Empire, it earned renown as the stronghold of brave warriors who lent their services to the royal forces. A temple was built and elaborate arrangements were initiated for regular rituals of worship in the traditional manner, i.e., offer of puja, lighting of the sacred lamp, offer of the incense and naivedyam to the deity, and so on. The prosperity of the village grew more and more. After the advent of Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai, he confirmed the divinity of that deity. At his instance, bathing of the deity, abhishekam, and an application of sandalwood paste all over were introduced. To the wonderment of the devotees, the stone revealed the divine form of Lord Sri Krishna with flute in hand. There is in Buddhabrati a distinguished and devout family with the name of Ratnakara. A great saint called Venka Avaduta was one of their ancestors. The paternal grandfather of Sathya Sai, named Kondamaraju, was a highly evolved soul and led a life of devotion to God. He could recite from memory stories and verses from the sacred epics of Sri Mahabhagavat and Ramayana. Inspired by a dream, he built a temple for goddess Satyabhama Devi, the consort of Lord Krishna. It is now known in Buddhabrati as Satyama's temple. Lakshmana was Gondamaraju's wife. The saintly couple had two sons. In memory of Venka Avaduta, they were named Peda, the elder, Venkamaraju, and China, the younger, Venkamaraju. Both of them, like their father, became accomplished singers of devotional verses and songs. Ishwaramma. Some close relatives of Kondamaraju were residing in a village called Kolimakuntla in the Koyalakuntla taluka of Kurnool district. Their family name was Misrakunda. Subaraju of that family built a temple for Lord Shiva in his village. While the temple was under construction, Subaraju was blessed with a female baby who was named Namagiri. While returning from a pilgrimage, Kondamaraju happened to visit that village. He was very much distressed to find that his relatives were leading uneasy lives due to the depredations of dacoits active in that region. He invited them to come over and take permanent residence in the village of Garnatha Nagapalli on the other bank of the river Chitravati, right opposite to Puttabrati, which he said would be a safe haven. As an added incentive, he gave his word that he would accept Namagiri as his daughter-in-law. The Misragunda family soon shifted and settled down in Karnatha Nagapalli and took up farming. As divinely ordained, Subaraju's daughter was wedded to Peda Venkamaraju. Not quite pleased with the name his daughter-in-law was given by her parents, Kondamaraju changed it to Ishwaramma, mother of Lord Ishwara, i.e. Lord Shiva. That name eventually proved not only quite appropriate, but also prophetic. The devout couple begot a son, Sheshmaraju, and 2 daughters, Venkama and Parvatama. To the great distress of Lakshmama, 4 miscarriages followed. She earnestly prayed to God to bless her family with another child. Swami's incarnation. The moment of divine fulfillment was about to dawn. The prayers of numerous saints, sages, and renunciates for the incarnation of God on earth were about to be answered. The agony of suffering humanity moved the ever-merciful Supreme Divinity. Ishwarama was again pregnant for the 8th time. Quite significantly, Lord Krishna was born as the 8th child of his mother, Devaki Devi. The inscrutable, the incomprehensible, the universal absolute was now about to reveal himself. Musical instruments in the house like mridangam, percussion instrument, and tampura, stringed instrument, used to produce of their own accord musical sounds. People were surprised and also delighted at this extraordinary occurrence, but at the same time they were confused and concerned. Pida Venkamaraju went all the way to the nearby town of Bhagawan to consult astrologers. After carefully going through ancient texts, they inquired whether any lady in the house was pregnant. When the reply was affirmative, the astrologers said, for the pleasure of the child in the womb, celestial musicians are providing entertainment. When divine incarnations were about to take place, such unusual incidents happened. They showed relevant parts of astrological treatises to Pida Venkamaraju in support of their opinion. It was 23rd of November 1926, according to the Hindu calendar, and corresponded to Somawar, Monday, Tariya, the 3rd day after the full moon, Kartika month, Akshaya year, and Ardha star. Hindus consider Mondays of the Kartika month as favorite days of Lord Shiva and perform special worship. From 4 a.m. on that day, Lakshmana was deeply absorbed in the worship, Vritam, of Lord Sri Satyanarayana Swami, being performed in the nearby house of Purohit, Brahmin priest. She was called several times as her daughter-in-law's delivery was imminent, but she ignored the calls. She decided not to return home without seeing the puja through and receiving the puja prasadam. She sat through and did indeed carry the prasadam home. She gave prasadam to her daughter-in-law. It was now 5:06 a.m. Cool breezes were wafting softly. Little bells on the top of the temple pillar, Dwaja Stambam, were producing gentle and melodious sounds. Inside the house, musical notes from the instruments spontaneously playing on their own were softly reverberating. At that wondrous moment, Sri Sathya Sai, the divine incarnation, was born. He had a tiny black mole, birthmark, on his left cheek. He had also another mole on his bosom, like the Srivatsa ornament adorning the bosom of Lord Mahavishnu. On his soles could be discerned the signs of Shankha, the conch, and Chakra, the circular disc, which are insignia of divinity. Lakshmana, Ishwarama's mother-in-law, placed the newborn baby delicately on palm leaves, as tradition demanded, in a corner of the delivery room. A little later she noticed a slight movement of the baby's bedsheets. When she picked up the baby, she found to her dismay a coiled cobra below the bed. True enough, Puttaparthi knew no death of snakes, but it was nevertheless quite unusual for a coiled cobra positioning itself as a bed for a newborn baby right in the delivery room. After the flutter caused by its presence cooled down, the snake was searched for, but it could not be found. There is absolutely no doubt that the snake was none other than Adi Shesha, the divine serpent who serves as a bed for Lord Sri Mahavishnu in Vaikuntha. This is the very first demonstration of divinity of Sri Sathya Sai. As the baby was born immediately after the mother had partaken of the prasadam of Lord Sri Satyanarayana Swami, he was given the name of Satyanarayana. The old man, Konda Maharaj, was immensely delighted with this name, for he was reminded of the incident in the Sri Mahabhagavat when Lord Sri Krishna was born as a human incarnation of Lord Narayana. Lord Brahma presented himself before the child and paid homage thus: Satya Vratam, Satya Param, Tri Satyam, Satyasya Yonim Nihitam cha satye, satyasya satyam, rita satya netram, satya atmakam tvam sharanam prasanam. O Lord, you are the embodiment of truth. In fact, you are the truth itself. Only you are the eternal truth. Truth is the only path to reach you. O the personification of truth, I surrender to thee. Even if one goes by the name given to the little baby, Satyam, it's evident that he is truly Lord Sri Narayana and the embodiment of truth, Satyam. The inner profound spiritual significance of the word Sathya has come out in all striking appropriateness in Swami's life. Ritam and Satyam are the two bejeweled ornaments of the ears of Shruti Mata, Veda Mata, the mother goddess of the Vedas. When we contemplate deeply on their meaning and spiritual significance, even now, ever new beauties are revealed to us. Satyam, eternal truth, and Nityam, knowing no beginning or end, are worth meditating on.
Not confused for Advent. In the Sri Mahabhagavad, it has been stated that Lord Narayana intended to incarnate on this earth as Sri Krishna and entered the womb of Devaki Devi. After Bhagawan Sathya proclaimed, "I am that, Krishna of yore," a doubt arose in the mind of a learned scholar named Sangubutla Rama Sharma. He was a scholar laureate of the ruler of Venkatagiri, and he was a learned scholar of scriptures and sacred epics. One day he happened to be with Sri Sathya Sai Baba in the Mandir when spiritual matters were being discussed. He asked, "Swami, what was your birth, through normal conception or by advent?" Everyone present was intrigued and somewhat surprised. What is this odd question? And in any case, what is its propriety? They wondered. But Swami certainly knew the inner substance and profound significance of the question. He turned towards Ishwaramma, the mother, who was sitting in the front row, and said, "Tell Rama Sharma what happened on that day when you were lifting water from the well." Ishwaramma then narrated her experience. "When I was lifting water from the well," she said, "suddenly I saw a ball of bluish sparkling light rolling down from the sky. It entered my body and I lost consciousness. When I regained my senses with ministrations of my mother-in-law, I told her what had happened. She advised me not to breathe a word about it to anyone because people might draw all sorts of undesirable and funny inferences." Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai now turned to Rama Sharma and said, "Do you now understand, Rama Sharma? My birth was not through conception, but by advent." Gandamaraju used to take this extraordinary child into his puja room and seat him there. As he would perform the worship, he would note that the child's presence gave him immense tranquility of mind and he could effortlessly concentrate on God in meditation. Why not? It is perfectly understandable. Whoever enthrones Bhagavan in his heart is bound to experience transcendental peace, which is something that every devotee knows from personal experience. The baby was extremely handsome. Neighbouring womenfolk used to spend hours and hours playing with him, caressing him and embracing him. Ishwaramma never bothered to know what caste or community or faith they belonged to. She raised no objection whatsoever. The baby too learned to love them and like their company. He would often run away from his mother's lap to the company of others. He was indeed restless, except in their company. Bhagavan Sathya Sai once declared that he would unfailingly go to those who yearned for him wholeheartedly. When we hear of his childhood pranks and plays, we realise that even as a child he had been practising what he declared much later, after he grew up. The house next to the one adjoining Gandamaraju's belonged to Garanam, village revenue official. The lady of the house was Subama. Whenever she took the charming child in her arms, his face would glow in happiness, he would titter with delight, and she would experience supreme joy. She had no children of her own. She often took this child into her home, as proudly as if she was bringing home precious treasures. She smothered him with her motherly love. Subama's family was a Brahmin family and was vegetarian in food habits. As Satyam always insisted on going to her house and found much happiness there, people used to observe that, like his grandfather, Gondamaraju, little Satyam would also be a vegetarian, and hence he preferred to spend much of his time in the environment of Subama's house. In fact, Satyam was not as happy in his own house as he was in Subama's. Some of the relatives of Gondamaraju used to comment that Ishwarama was Devaki, the natal mother of Lord Krishna, while Subama was Yashoda, his foster mother. Another unusual feature of Satyam was that he never used to ask for any particular thing to eat, nor for any particular piece of clothing. Clothes used to be bought from the neighbouring towns of Hindupuram and Anantapuram for all children in the family. The little ones would gather around them and eagerly snatch up pieces they preferred, but Satyam would cheerfully accept whatever was left behind. He never indicated that he had any choice of his own. There was nothing that he would particularly prefer. On the other hand, when he saw the other children in happiness, Satyam's face would bloom with pleasure and satisfaction. "Your happiness is my food," Swami declared many years later. That surely must have held true even when Satyam was a mere child. He was full of pity, compassion, love and sympathy for any living being subjected to hardship and grief. A few playful boys once collected about a dozen frogs and were carrying them in a basket. They planned to have fun by subjecting the poor creatures to some sort of torture. Satyam requested that they be freed. The boys did not agree. Suddenly, Satyam transformed them into pigeons through his divine will. He told them that there were no frogs in the basket. When they disbelievingly opened the lid to see, the birds escaped into the sky. We can read a spiritual meaning too in this incident. From that day to this day, Bhagawan had been transforming ordinary individuals who are entrapped and living like frogs in the deep mire of ignorance into strong human beings who are bold and happy and capable of soaring free in the spiritual firmament like birds in skies. Even as a little boy, Satyam was fond of natural beauty. He spent much time contemplating nature. Mountain peaks, stars and sky gave him profound happiness as he contemplated on them spellbound. At such times he appeared serene and serious, way beyond his tender age. The women of Puttaparthi who had seen him so lost in his own thoughts used to refer to him as Brahmajanani, one who attained supreme realization. They might have, no doubt, said so in mirth and frolic. They could never suspect that the boy they were making fun of was indeed Brahmajanani. Divine touch. Ishwarama and Karanam Subama would often sit at dusk in the front portico of their houses overlooking the street and spend time in conversation. Right in front of them in the street, Satyam would wear a bandage across his eyes and play hide and seek with his colleagues. That was the time when cattle headed home from pasture. There was always the risk of unruly animals. Trampling passers-by. Ishwarama would naturally feel apprehensive about her darling child's safety, but Subama would always reassure her, "Calm yourself and just keep watching. Nothing untoward will happen." The blindfolded Satyam would catch hold of some rogue animal. Under his gentle touch, the animal would become docile, lower its head and move away harmlessly. Such incidents used to leave onlookers baffled. Perhaps because Satyam was born under the auspicious influence of the Urdhva star, his heart would melt at the very sight of suffering. Urdhva in Sanskrit means compassionate. If a hungry person stood at his door, Satyam would run inside, bring some food and place it affectionately into the outstretched hands. The glow of happiness in the eyes of the hungry person would fill Satyam's heart with satisfaction. He used to bring his home persons shivering from cold and gave them clothes to cover themselves. It was customary for people to carry fowl upside down by their legs, bound together and heads hanging down, a position torturous to the birds. Bullocks were goaded to move faster by twisting their tails cruelly. At the sight of such insensate cruelty, Satyam would suffer the agony of the poor birds and animals in himself. After finishing school in Puttaparthi, Satyam went to the nearby town of Bhagawan and enrolled in the middle school. The loving mother watched with bated breath as her little child prepared day after day to go to Bhagawan. He was hardly out of his cradle, but now he had to walk all the way to town. Satyam would put on a white shirt and shorts, apply vibhuti on his forehead, and a red dot of vermilion to lend accent to it. With a small bag containing his simple midday meal of cooked ragi, a coarse grain, in one hand, and a bag of books in the other, he would bid her goodbye every morning. The poor lady's eyes would swim in tears. He would leave home at about 8:30 a.m. and return only at dusk. How could she endure the agony of his absence until then? Sadness haunted her every moment of the day. His fellow pupils at school were envious of Satyam. He was evidently the cynosure because of his excellent sense of cleanliness and immaculate orderliness. As soon as the boys stepped out of the village, they would catch hold of Satyam and duck him in the river in Chitravati to make his spotless white clothes dirtier than theirs. Their dirty deed accomplished, they would feel happy and fulfilled. But never would Satyam complain to his beloved mother against them.
The teacher's chair. In the school in Bhagawan, a teacher by the name of Kondappa was dictating notes to his pupils who were assiduously taking them down. Satyam alone was not doing so, which annoyed the teacher. How could he know that Satyam, the all-knowing and all-comprehending, had no need for taking down any notes? He ordered Satyam to stand upon the bench, a punishment usually meted out to the delinquent boys. The boy meekly obeyed. Time passed and the bell struck to mark the end of that class, and Kondappa had to leave. Though he tried to get out of his chair, he could not, as it stuck to his bottom. The teacher who was to take the next class was Mehboob Khan. He came in and understood the situation. He asked Satyam to get down and be seated. As soon as Satyam took his seat, Kondappa was automatically released from his own chair. This was but one small leela of Satyam that was played merely to demonstrate that he was no ordinary run-of-the-mill schoolboy. News of this episode soon spread in Bhagawan and caused some unrest too. The incident proves that an incarnation of God cannot be bound by man-made limitations. In due course, Kondappa recognized Satyam's divinity and also wrote and published some poems in his praise. When the story of the teacher's chair reached Esharamma, she feared for the future of a boy's education. She cautioned Satyam, "If you do not study hard and succeed in your schooling, you will have no future but to eke out a living by tending cattle." Well, can the word of Bhagawan's mother ever go wrong? Swami did not work hard at his studies in school, but as his divine mother had warned, he's certainly tending cattle. What are the animals now in his care? All living beings are now under his care and protection. That is why he has verily become Pashupati, the Lord of animals, one of the attributes of Lord Shiva. His simple-minded mother had never dreamt that her darling child, so remiss at school, would eventually take up such a glorious job, that of minding the universe as Bhagavan. The end of the year saw Satyam appearing for the final examinations held in the town of Penugonda. He came first, and the people of Penugonda took out a grand processions in honor of this brilliant boy. In her heart of hearts, Esharamma was delighted at the success of a charming boy, but she was at the same time worried that this might arouse more jealousy amongst the other boys. Often did she wonder and feel astonished at some of the words uttered by Satyam, his decisions and conclusions, the sharpness of his views and the manner in which he expounded them. Subhamma's husband, Karnam, was sporting a mustache all too odd and prominent, somewhat in the style of Hitler. His conduct also was rather unusual. Satyam composed songs making fun of him and organized his colleagues to sing them in public. Esharamma would not approve of such mischievous activities. She entrusted the task of correcting Satyam, of all people, to Subama. Subama admonished Esharamba, "That little guru knows how to distinguish between good and bad. Leave it to him and let him be." With a mere wave of his hand, Satyam would materialize whatever his companions asked for, be it a fruit or a flower or sweets. When they asked to know where he was getting them from, he merely said that some celestial beings were giving them to him. Yes, there can be no doubt about what he claimed. Swami is the Supreme Master. It is but natural that heavenly beings should serve him with whatever he demands. Tiger Hunter chided. It was around noon one day when a driver in uniform was noticed striding into Puttaparthi. As he walked in, birds on the branches of trees raised loud cries of fear and distress. Satyam was sitting in front of the portico of Karanam Subama's house, conversing with his friends. As the driver stepped up there, the children scattered in fright. The man told Satyam that his master's jeep got stranded on the other bank of the river Chitravati. The master was in a hot temper. Having heard that a boy of miracles was in this village, he had come here to obtain some vibhuti if it could get the master out of his problem. Satyam agreed to follow him to the jeep. The master was proudly stroking the dead body of a tigress, evidently shot by him in the forest. Satyam said to him, "What harm has this poor animal done to you? Why have you killed it for no reason? Her two little cubs are missing their mother and are feeling miserable. It was I who made your vehicle break down to make you realize this. Go back to those little motherless cubs, rescue them, and entrust them to the care of a proper zoo. Never should you kill a living being for your own pleasure and enjoyment. You might shoot, but only with a camera, not with a gun. Now that would bring you name and fame." Surprisingly, the engine of the vehicle sprang to life with a mere touch of Satyam, and it went back the way it had come. Peda Venkamaraju, Satyam's father, was in a panic situation at home. For defying an Englishman, that too one who was sporting a gun, his little son might invite trouble from the police. On the other hand, the Englishman felt remorseful. Some time later, he brought the skin of the dead tigress and offered it to serve as a footrest for Satyam. Even today, it is there in Prashanti Nilayam near Swami's throne, serving Swami as his footrest. Each and every incident of Swami's life serves as a mirror reflecting the essentiality of Satyam's divine personality. Swami is the personification of ahimsa, principle of non-violence, embodiment of compassion and pity for helpless creatures. He is Jesus Christ and Bhagawan Buddha personified. Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba is the teacher of teachers. Om Sri Sathya Sai Parabrahmane Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. End of chapter 3.
Pushpagiri festival. Sometime after Satyam got in the high school, the annual festival at Pushpagiri, a temple town nearby, was to be held. The physical education instructor of the school ordered a scout troop for doing service during the festival. Satyam enrolled himself in the troop as he felt that he would be enabled to do social work and service. As he did not have enough money to spend, he did not join the school group going to Pushpagiri, and there separately by himself, walking all the way. He could not afford to buy food, so he just fasted all the days he was there. He never mentioned this either to his teacher or to his companions. He cheerfully participated in all the social service activities. It's true. If anyone asked him whether he had his meals, he would hold out his hand for them to smell. His hand smelled of sweets made of pure ghee. His friends believed that he must have taken some tasty food at some of his relatives' house. The master would allocate duties evenly to all the boys in his charge, including Satyam. Though Satyam was not as sturdy as others. Restoring missing children to their parents, providing drinking water to the pilgrims, medical requirements, and rendering first aid. These were some of the activities Satyam was engaged in. By his dedication and Satyam set a fine example as a social worker. The scout troop, of which Satyam was a star in the Pushpagiri festival, was undoubtedly the precursor of the present-day Sri Sathya Sai Sevadal, which is rendering yeoman services to mankind. On successfully completing his teacher's training course, Seshama Raju was appointed as Telugu in Uravakonda. As a teacher, he was describing to the children in his class pranks of Balakrishna and Sri Rama, but he could not understand the meaning of the Leelas being displayed in him by the God incarnate. Both he and his father mistakenly attributed them to goblins and evil spirits. Sheshama Raju firmly believed that if his little brother were entrusted to his care, he would do use of the rod. Rama agreed to send her darling son to Uravakonda. I am the servitor of all. Satyam was admitted in grade 8 in the high school in Uravakonda. Brother Sheshama Raju. There was no drinking water in the house. It had to be fetched from a well a mile away from the town. To meet the daily needs, Satyam would bring water every day, morning and evening, making 2 or 3 trips each day. He would carry 2 large containers on each trip, slung one at each end of a bamboo pole, balanced on his shoulders. The neighbors soon discovered affable and obliging nature. He would ask him endearingly to fetch some water for them too, and that would cheerfully meet their requirements as well. Satyam returned to Puttaparthi for the holidays. Ishwarama prepared her an oil bath. When she set about applying oil to his body, she found calluses on his shoulders. The skin darkened. He tried to evade her anxious inquiries, but when pressed, explained with a disarming smile, "It is probably due to my brother for our elder brother's household." Eyes beaming, the loving mother inquired why he should have to fetch water. "Sir, how can they live on brackish water? That apart, dear mother, is it not a fact that I have come only to serve people? answer brought no solace to the distressed mother. Anne Marie Marwaha, a lady employed with the German embassy in New Delhi, had enjoyed the good fortunes of tasting the sweetness of Bhagwan's love. On one of his visits to Puttaparthi, she asked, "What is the true nature of your incarnation? I fail to understand it." Bhagwan softly replied, "What shall I say? To tell you in a nutshell, I am the servitor of all." The reply took her by storm. In a torment of pity, she sobbed volubly. She cried, "Why do you say like this, Baba?" Swami explained, "Dear child, this is the truth. Everyone gives me a job to do. Whoever does everyone's errand is indeed the servitor of all, is it not?" Bhagwan's words and deeds, be they of his childhood days or of the present day, are the same. Swami water as a child. Even today, grown up as he is still fetching fresh, wholesome drinking water. The only difference is that a new name has now been given to his labors, Sri Sathya Sai Drinking Water Project. In the olden days, we requested him, "Babu," that is, dear boy, "will you bring some drinking water for us too?" Today, people from neighboring districts sing to him, "Baba, will you give us some drinking water for us too?" Bhagwan answers with boundless love, "Yes, yes, certainly, certainly." Some of them have only heard of Puttaparthi, but do not know where it is. They have to find out how to reach there. In their distress, they make their arduous way to Baba, to their Divine Mother, for succor. And the compassionate mother responds, "My poor children have come to me, praying not for sumptuous feast, but for a mere quaff." The motherly assurance of Bhagwan comes forth spontaneously. "Surely, surely." It is not one mother, but 1,000 mothers. Indeed, it is the love of 1,000,000 mothers. Swami achieves single-handedly by a government or a whole nation could not accomplish. The beneficiaries are his own children. For their welfare, he has spent hundreds of crores of rupees on a drinking water project. People are grateful, but can this immense dough be repaid forever? The Sri Sathya Sai Drinking Water Project has so far covered about 70 villages and 11 towns. It is considered to be one of the marvels of the world. Water flows through 2,500 of pipeline and quenches the thirst of 1,000,000 people in the Rayalaseema region of Andhra Pradesh. The necklace of Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba is visible in every meter of the long pipeline.
Do these match words? During his school days in Urukunda, Sathya was encouraged and inspired to write a short play dealing with human values. It is significantly titled, Do Deeds Match Words? The details of that play, written a long time back, are topical even today. Scene 1 of the play opens with a woman who is reading and interpreting verses in the Sri Mahabhagavat to a group of women. In the course of her discourse, she exhorts the audience not to waste charity on able bodies, beggars, and the indolent, but to help only those who are infirm, disabled, old, or handicapped. After gathering disperses, a blind man approaches her and begs for help. She is annoyed and drives him away. A moment later, a Haridas wearing a prominent caste marks all over his body and singing songs, comes begging for alms. He is playing on a stringed instrument as an accompaniment to his singing. The lady gives him some rice as well as cash, bows to his feet, and seeks his blessing. Krishna, her son, is witness to what has gone by. He perturbed and asked her, "Dear mother, what did you teach your friends during your religious discourse? And what have you done just now?" She gets wild and shouts at him, "Shut up! Does anybody do as he says?" Scene 2 shows the same boy with his father in the letters office. His father extols the benefits of education and concludes his speech saying one should obtain good education, overcoming every obstacle. A poor boy standing outside is overhearing the inspiring words through an open window. He comes in and says, "Sir, thanks to monetary assistance from a high-minded person like you, I managed to pay my school fee, but now I am short of 1 rupee to pay this month's fee. Kindly help me." The gentleman replies that he does not have even a paisa with him and opens his purse to show that it is empty. After the disappointed student leaves, several colleagues descend on him and ask for contribution for a function and refreshment to welcome an officer newly posted to the office. In his opinion, he tells them, such an important occasion deserves to be celebrated on a big scale and give 20 rupees as his contribution. Isn't Krishna a mute witness to all this? Ask his father, "Daddy, did you speak at length and in glowing terms about the value of education and the importance of getting educated at any cost? But when that poor schoolboy begged for just a single rupee for the sake of educating himself, you turned him down. On the other hand, you have readily parted with 20 rupees for the sake of an ostentatious waste. Why?" The man turned on him in great annoyance. "Do these of people match their words? Shut up and go to school." In scene 3, Krishna is seen sitting in his class. His teacher enters in a great fury. "The inspector of schools is visiting us today," he tells the class. "We have finished 23 lessons so far. But if the inspector asks you, tell him that we have completed 32. I will now do the 33rd lesson. Later, when the inspector comes here, I will teach it afresh in his presence. And if I am doing it for the first time, whatever question I put to you now will be repeated in his presence, so that you will impress him with your correct answers." Krishna meets the teacher a little later. When he is alone, he asks him, "Sir, the new lesson you taught us today is about King Sathya Harichandra, who was dedicated to truth irrespective of consequences. Even as you taught us about such a noble person, you directed us to speak lies. This is improper." The teacher flees into a range and admonishes him. Is there anyone whose action accord with his words? In the 4th and final scene, Krishna flings his books aside and refuses to go to school. Unable to bring him round, the parents sent for his teacher. In the presence of all the three, the boy says, "You are of course teaching me good lessons, but you do not allow me to act on the prospects I hear from you. Of what use are your lessons? I do not want to learn them." The elders are spellbound, but see the point, the relevant, and express regrets. This is the substance of the short play written by Satyam when he was barely 12 years of age. He also donned Krishna's role when it was played. He conveyed through that role to the world that hypocrisy should be eschewed and everyone should live up to his word. From that day right up to this day, he has been exhorting people. Mere words are not enough. Your action should conform to what you speak. This string message reveals to the entire world and guides every aspirant sadhakas towards a spiritual elevation. The missing horse. When Satyam was at school in Urukunda, a poor Muslim of that town was making a living by playing a horse training. One day his horse went missing. Failing to find it, the poor man came to Satyam for help. The boy directed him to a wood situated about 1.5 miles away from the town. He did so, found his horse grazing there. From then on, Muslims of the town developed great love and respect for Satyam. News of Satyam's uncommon abilities spread far and wide. Long before this, Shirdi Sai Baba also displayed a similar miracle when a well-to-do Muslim by the name of Chandibai Patel of Dupakada village in the Arunagabda district lost his mare. Disappointed and tired after a fruitless search for the missing beast, he was dejected, dragging himself home with a saddle on his back. Shri Sai Baba saw him, took pity at his dependency, and directed him to search for his mare in the nearby channel. Chandi Patel did as told, and to his great surprise and delight, found the animal there. Now, what is the deeper meaning of these two similar incidents? The horse or mare represents the human mind that is ever unsteady. One who succeeds in the comprehending the true nature of mind is truly a Chitachora. Ashwa is the Sanskrit word for horse, meaning one that is perpetually in motion. We normally take Ashwa to mean a horse, but it is only its broad meaning. A horse is always in motion, moving its leg, tail, or ears every moment. Thus, Ashwa stands for the quality of understandingness, the state of being continuously disturbed, restless. The Sanskrit word Ashwamedha, horse sacrifice, means offering one's unsteady mind to God. The Sanskrit word Ashwatya, perpetual tree, likewise refers to a tree that is in a perpetual motion. Even when there is a little breeze, its leaves keep moving. The human mind also keeps on wavering similarly, both during sleep and wakefulness. Baba says that a horse sacrifice, Ashwamedha, does not mean that the animal should be physically killed in flesh and blood and offered to God. The true meaning is that our animal nature should be given up as an offering to God. Divine purpose acts the densier. When Satyam was at school in Urukunda, his headmaster arranged a benefit program for raising funds for the school. Vishyandramani, the celebrated dancer of those days, was to dance. Publicity material was printed and widely distributed. But due to some unexpected development, she could not keep her appointment. Lakshmipati, the headmaster, got worried and became tense. Satyam approached him and told him not to worry the item of dance that Rishyandamani was to perform. he said he would himself do. The amazing item that made her justify famous was indeed very difficult to perform. She would put a bottle made of glass on her head, position her plate thereon, and place some lighted oil lamp in the plate. She would then dance, and while continuing with it, picks up a handkerchief from the ground with her lips. Sathya offered to do something more astonishing. Sir, she picks up only a handkerchief with her lips. He said, I will pick up a needle with my eyelid, but please announce that the performing artist is Rishyandra Mani herself. Several years later, Swami described in his own words what happened on that day. I made to wear a sari too big for me. The organizers provided a pigtail of the sort worn by women. As you know, while dancing, the dancers flick it from side to side, so they made it thick and long, lest it should fall off while I danced. They strongly tied it all over. Strings of bells had gnawed my ankle. They found a jalopy to carry me from my makeup place to the venue of the dance program. There was a run on tickets as nobody wanted to miss Rishyandra Mani's dance. When musical instruments began playing, I gently shook my ankle bell to produce captivating sound. The audience lost themselves in ecstasy. The headmaster placed a bottle on the crown of my head. Another teacher positioned a plate gingerly thereon and lighted the lamp. Why did they do all this in public? Just to satisfy the doubters who might be thinking that I had all these things fixed firmly and securely on my head. I must be shown to their satisfaction that they were all loosely positioned. Music was being played for my dance. I was moving around and around on the stage. Even as I danced, I suddenly bent down and picked up with my eyelid a needle placed on the ground. The audience clapped and clapped in delight and applause. The district collector, an Englishman, came on the stage to award a medal to me. His name was Hosley. He wanted to touch me before giving the medal. I refused. He said, I'm just like a brother to you. I want to place this medal around your neck. I replied, I'm just like your sister. Put it into my hand. From the side of the stage, the headmaster was signaling to me that he was the collector and that I should accept without fuss. But as I was standing there as Rishyandra, I refused to be touched by the man. Meanwhile, there were claps and noises from the audience, asking the collector to hand over the medal and return to his seat. He gave it to me and went back disappointed. The president of Sudapatha district board was Srimati Ramasubhamma. During those days, she came to the school on the next day. It is due to Rishyandra Mani, she said, that the school could raise so much money for constructing its building. We wanted to honor her and have brought an expensive sari as a gift for her. She called out for Rishyandra Mani and requested her to come onto the stage. From where could she come? As the audience eagerly awaited the great dancer, I came running. I was wearing shorts. The guard stopped me. Then our headmaster intervened and told him, yesterday Rishyandra Mani is really this boy. Let him come in. Everyone was puzzled. On seeing me, Srimati Ramasubhamma lifted me up into her arms, kissed me and said, my dear child, you are so tender in age, but have brought great honor to us. I am proud that there are talented person like you in our country. She was all praise for me ever since she showed great love for Swami. Wherever she went, she would narrate tales of Swami's glory. This is how Swami gave a dance program that day in the high school in Urukunda. The whole universe is stage for the Supreme Being. Ever since that day, Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai has been assuming countless forms and fascinating the world with his melodious music and divine dance.
The sting of a scorpion. On the 8th of March, a momentous event took place in Uruvakanda. Satyam was stung by a big black scorpion. His body lost sensation. He sank into unconsciousness. The news spread like wildfire and agitated many people. In that region, a sting often meant death, and Satyam The sting of a scorpion. On the 8th of March, 1940, a momentous event took place in Uruvakanda. Satyam was stung by a big black scorpion. His body lost sensation. He sank into unconsciousness. The news spread like wildfire and agitated many people. In that region, a sting of a scorpion often meant death. Satyam was administered several injections and medicines, but none availed. Slowly he recovered in a couple of days, got up on his own and began to move about. But he seemed to have undergone a total transformation, both mentally and physically. It was as though a spiritual spark dormant in his inner being suddenly came to life and began to glow. The effulgence of the Supreme Being comes only after the darkest period. The Lord of Shirdi was about to unveil and display in sharp relief the immense body of his own spiritual power through medium of this boy. Satyam was often seen lost in his own thoughts. He recited Sanskrit slokas, sang songs, and gave religious discourses. His behavior was strange and inscrutable. Sheshamaraju, his parents were deeply concerned and confused. Years later, somebody gave a speech in the presence of Baba. He said, Swami was stung by a scorpion. That is the reason why he acquired spiritual powers from that day. Baba, who spoke after him, stated, the person who spoke before me said that Swami obtained spiritual powers because of a scorpion sting. Let him be stung by 100 scorpions. Let us see whether it would bring any spiritual powers to him. There is no doubt the incident of the scorpion sting is merely a turning point in Swami's life. It cannot be the cause of his divine powers. It merely marks a state of his sankalpam, the will to unveil his divinity. The bestower of knowledge. Going back to the happenings in Uruvakanda, one day, Satyam appeared deeply lost in himself. Suddenly he said, Narayan Sastri next door is committing many mistakes in his exposition of the Mahabhagavata. Send for him. Some persons went to the learned man and requested him to come and see Satyam. Disdainfully, Sastri said, he is but a mere boy. He's finding fault with my learning. What does he know? He did not bother to come, but Satyam insisted. This time, the intermediaries could persuade the old man to come into Satyam's presence. The boy explained to him all the errors he had committed, he also put to him some questions on the Puranas, the sacred scriptures. The scholarly Sastri admitted his lapses and acknowledged the corrections made by Satyam. Astounded at the young boy's brilliance and erudition, Sastri prostrated before himself at his feet. Even now, occasionally, Bhagawan finds scholars whose quest for supreme reality consists merely of profound study of scriptures, sacred texts, and mantras. They devote a lot of their time to scholarly expositions of their deep learning, but in their single-minded dedication to learning, they fail to recognize that the very supreme being they are aspiring to reach through scholarship, the very object of their studies, is present right in front of them in human form. Scales of intensive learning prevent their eyes from visualizing the ultimate reality in the person near at hand, in flesh and blood. Looking far, they miss what is close by. Bhagawan grants such persons proper insight that they are in need of. In this context, it is relevant to recall an interesting incident that reveals Bhagawan's profound knowledge of the scriptures. A yajna was performed during the Dasera festivities some years back. Elaborate arrangements were made and a special dais was erected for the purpose. Eminent scholars of the Vedas, other scriptures, were in attendance. Some of them had no faith in Baba's divinity. They had not yet acquired sincere love and devotion for him. Probably because of that casual, irreverent attitude, a lapse occurred. One of the scholars who was reciting a sacred mantra committed a mistake in pronunciation. Instead of correcting himself promptly, the scholar went ahead thinking perhaps the lapse went unnoticed. Bhagawan turns towards him, looked at him seriously for a moment, and sternly said, "Sastri, chant it again properly." The scholar trembled as if he was lashed. Then Swami started reciting that mantra with impeccable intonation. The assembled scholars were astonished and joined Swami in reciting the mantra with proper intonation. Forbearance. As Satyam's fame spread, people from far and near began flocking to Uravakonda to meet the amazing boy. Tongues wagged. Some said he was a victim of some evil spell, black magic, that he was possessed by wild spirits, he was controlled by a demon, and the tantric or witchcraft might cure him. The distraught Seshamaraju brought in a worshipper of goddess Shakti to help Satyam. Satyam chastised him. "You are worshipping me every day. You're seeking my blessings daily. How dare you now come to give me treatment? Bow to my feet with reverence and depart like a good boy." The poor man got frightened and saluted Satyam and left. Satyam was brought back from Uravakonda to Puttaparthi by his parents. He was shown to well-known doctors of Bellary, Tapovanam. None of them could diagnose his problem. Now and then, Satyam would suddenly cry out, "There, Devtas, celestial beings are coming. Offer arti, sacred lighting of lamp, camphor as a mark of devotion." Such utterance used to puzzle and distress members of his household. They were told of a reputed exorcist near the town of Kadri, who could drive away even the vilest and the most intractable evil spirit. Peda Venkamaraju decided to take Satyam to him. Together with his daughters, Seshamaraju, Satyam, Pedamavekam Raju traveled there in a bullock cart. The exorcist had a dreadful mane and fiery eyes. He subjected the 14-year-old boy to crude procedures, cruel corporal punishments. He gashed the victim's shaven head with a razor at several places. While blood flowed in streams, he poured lemon juice, onion juice onto the wounds. He rubbed an ointment in his eyes, which is notorious for causing unbearable smarting. He poured 101 pots of water on the blooded and burning head. The inhuman torture which Satyam silently bore with fortitude and forbearance shocked his unfortunate, helpless family members. They felt shaken and remorseful. The exorcist grew wilder because he believed that the devilish spirit that possessed Satyam was unyielding, unable to bear their mental agony at having surrendered their dear child to such inhumane torture. The family begged the tormentor to give the boy some respite. They pleaded that after he recovered somewhat, he would be brought back for further treatment. Satyam was thus rescued from further torture at the hands of the exorcist. Years later, a Haridas was rendering Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Leela, Sai Baba's life, in his very presence. As he reached this particular episode of Swami's bodily torture at the hands of the heartless brute, Swami intervened. Those details are too painful even to hear. Skip over them, Bangaru. Sometime later, Sri Kasturi asked, Swami, you found it so painful even to hear those sufferings. Why did you agree at all to undergo such inhuman treatment at that time? The reply of Bhagawan Sai is very revealing. He explained, whatever be the suffering of this body is put to, it will not affect me. I transcend happiness and sorrow of every kind. I wanted to demonstrate these aspects of mine to the world. That is why I endured all those tortures with patience and forbearance. I invited that punishment willingly because my suffering would convince people of my spirituality. They would develop trust and faith in me and set foot in the rewarding realm of devotion of God, bhakti. There was a lawyer in the town of Penagonda called Krishna Acharyalu. He came down to Puttaparthi to see Satyam and concluded that his condition was much more serious than he had imagined. He advised Satyam's elders to take him to the temple town of Gatikachalam. He felt that the darshan of Lord Narasimha, Swami, man-lion, avatar of Lord Sri Mahavishnu, the presiding deity there, would cure Satyam. On hearing the words of the lawyer, Satyam smiled and asked him, Sir, I am the presiding deity of Gatikachalam. Are you advising that I should be taken for my own darshan?
I am Sai Baba. It was now 23rd May 1940. Satyam was sitting in the front portico of his home in Puttaparthi, materializing sugar candy and flowers and distributing them to one and all. The scene was one of merriment and delight. Some went to Pedavenkaparaju and invited him to come and enjoy the wonderful spectacle. The poor father could not tolerate what he thought was his son's cheap trickery or sleight of hand. He picked up a stout stick and marched to Satyam and demanded, "Who are you? Tell me, are you God or an evil spirit?" Satyam looked at his father. He was perfectly serene. Calmly but clearly and firmly, he said, "I am Sai Baba. I am of Apastamba Sutra and of Bhardwaja Shagotra. I have come to rescue all of you, smitten as you are with fear and lack of mental equanimity. Your ancestor, Venka Avaduta, prayed to me to take birth in your family. In response to his prayers, I have incarnated." Veda Venkaparaju was thunderstruck. He did not notice that this big stick in his hand slipped to the floor. Why did his father, Veda Venkaparaju, become so overcome and speechless in a moment? Why did he undergo such immediate transformation at the mention of the great Avaduta's name? The house of Gondama Raju, father of Veda Venkaparaju, used to be visited often by a great person called Venka Avaduta. He wore a perpetual smile on his face. He was a picture of spiritual equanimity and bliss. The clothes he wore would wear out and be reduced to shreds on his body, but he never cared. If he placed his palm on any person's head, that person would taste profound spiritual experience. Nobody knew where he stayed, when he would come, and where he would go. He was a sannyasi, renunciate. In every sense of the term, he was just like a piece of wood, floating free in a stream of water. Such realized noble persons who have attained supreme levels of renunciation and non-involvement are known as avadutas. In the learned opinion of those familiar with sublime realms of knowledge, Venka Avaduta was the same Venkusa, who had fostered Shirdi Sai in his childhood. The Avaduta used to spend time now and then with Godamaraju discussing spiritual matters. One day, both of them sat conversing in a banana plantation. All of a sudden, Venka Avaduta fell silent. Godamaraju inquired why he was so abruptly became silent. The reply was, "Godamaraju, Mother Earth is weeping. Don't you hear her sobs?" Godamaraju stared in disbelief. Venka Avaduta went on, "Very soon, the Supreme Being will incarnate himself on earth in human form. You are destined to witness that incarnation." He repeated the words a couple of times. He asked Godamaraju to place his hand in his own and assert that he earnestly believed the extraordinary prediction. Sometime later, Venka Avaduta left his physical body. Now Veda Venkaparaju heard his son mentioning the glorious name of the great ancestral saint. Like a flash, he remembered the closeness of that divine person with this family, and also his fantastic prediction about the coming incarnation. When details of what happened reached the ears of the aged Godamaraju, his eyes swam in tears of happiness. But then there was a small hitch. None of them who were present there heard Satyam speak. Knew Sai Baba. Who was he? Veda Venkaparaju heard that a government official had arrived at Benukonda on transfer in his job, and also he daily worshipped a fakir called Sai Baba. So one day he took his son to him. That gentleman saw the boy and declared that he was suffering from some brain disorder and needed to be admitted into hospital for proper treatment. On hearing his advice, Satyam asked him, "Whose brain is ill, yours or mine? You daily worship this very Sai present right before you in flesh and blood, but fail to recognize him as you have no brain." He asked him to hold his hands and waving his hand, materialized heaps of vibhuti and poured it into his hand. He also threw it all over the terrified man's residence. On a Thursday, one of the persons gathered around Satyam asked for some proof that he was Sai Baba. Satyam asked him whether he indeed needed proof. Then he called for some jasmine flowers. Taking them in his hands, he flung them onto the floor. To the astonishment of everyone, the flowers arranged themselves to read Sai Baba in the Telugu script. All doubts melted away. The Great Annunciation. It was Monday, 20th of October, 1940. Satyam was there in Urvakonda. Having resumed his interrupted schooling, he was on his way to school when suddenly he turned back, returned home, flung his books away, and cried out loudly, "I no longer belong to you. Maya delusion has left me. My devotees are eagerly calling me." On hearing these loud words, his sister-in-law looked out of her kitchen window. She saw a halo of blinding luminescence around Satyam's head. "I am leaving," he told her. "I am leaving," he told her. "The work I have come here for has to be initiated." As he said these words, his brother Shesha Maraju and the neighbor Narayan Shastri arrived on the scene. On seeing the splendorous halo, Shastri fell at the feet of Satyam. Shesha Maraju stood speechless and motionless. Glorious was the crown of effulgent light. Satyam walked to a nearby large garden belonging to Anjanela Yulu, an inspector of excise. He sat on a boulder there. Several eager devotees sat around him. Satyam began singing a bhajan song. The first in the vast of bhajan songs, which are now residing all over the world. Manasa bhajare Guru Charanam Dushtara Bhava Sagara Taranam. First learn that you are in Bhavasagara, ocean of worldly life. Next, resolve on Taranam, crossing it. Then fix a guru or any name and form of God which appeals to you. Then dwell on his glory. Do bhajan, but do it with all your mind and concentration. Sing in praise of the Master's lotus feet with all your heart. It enables you to cross the difficult to cross ocean of the birth-death cycle. Devotees forgot themselves as they sang in tune with him. Some lighted joss sticks, others garlanded Satyam. A photographer turned up and prepared to photograph him. A small rock stood in front of Satyam, intruding into the picture, and the cameraman desired it to be removed. Satyam said, "Let it be. Go ahead and take your photograph." When the film was eventually developed and printed, the small stone, seen to the astonishment of everyone as Shirdi Sai Baba's form.
References to Bhagawan Sathya Sai Baba in ancient treatises. Dr. E.V.V. Sastry, a member of the Astrological Research Society of India, studied several Nadi treatises written thousands of years ago by various sages and discovered therein many stunning references to Bhagawan Sathya Sai Baba, which he published. Some excerpts are given here. Agastya Nadi says, "Sathya Sai Baba will heal diseases of people with lightning speed. By his mere will, he will bestow health. Many educational institutions will be established by him. He will publish numerous books on spiritual subjects. He will develop spirituality in humanity. To establish Dharma and to resuscitate Dharma will constitute the principal features of his mission. In his earlier incarnation, he would be Shirdi Sai Baba. He will be the embodiment of kindness and compassion. He is the Father of the universe. He will be an all-merciful avatar of God, preceptor, protector, and Father of the world." Buddha Nadi records, Baba will be eternally immersed in Anandam, bliss. Shukra Nadi says, his residence will be called Prashanti Nilayam. By emphasizing the principles of Sathya, Dharma, Shanti, and Prema, he will establish and spread peace all through the world. He always delights in serving humanity. He will be possessing all powers and siddhis. The person of divine aspects would be previously Shirdivasi, resident of Shirdi. He is Sankalpa Siddha. Whatever he wills happens. He will be in Nirvikalpa Samadhi state. He is God incarnate. He will derive immense joy in the service of mankind. Sri Chinnatare consulted Brahmanadi and found therein precise references to Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai. In his life, Thursdays will be sacred days. By the way he will live and act, he would create the illusion of being just an ordinary individual residing in Puttapati. He will bear the name of Narayana. He will be the incarnation of Sivachakti, the reincarnation of Chiradisai. Born on the banks of the river Chitravati in a tranquil environment, he will be the embodiment of supreme equanimity. In the Nadi preserved carefully in the Subramanya Swami temple in Palani, it is written, in the Andhra region, surrounded by Tamil, Kerala and Karnataka lands, on the banks of the river Chitravati, God will incarnate himself. His name will be Satya Narayana. He is a great yogi, supreme yogi, never goes to sleep. In Padma Puran, authored by the great Rishi Parasara, it is written, in the village named Paddi will be born a person called Satyam. He will be 5 feet 3 inches high. He will act like a powerful magnet capable of drawing to himself the whole world. Baba himself informed devotees that Padma Puran was translated into English by an Englishman called Wilson. Baba also said that the complete copy of Jaimini Bharadam, which contained clear references to Sathya Sai, is in the possession of some spiritually elevated persons. In Vishnu Puran, it was mentioned that he will display great superhuman powers in establishing the new age of truth. His parents will be devotees of Lord Vishnu and will reside in a village worshipping the cowherd form of Sri Krishna. Sri Aurobindo was a great yogi, Mahayogi, and a great rishi, Maharshi. He was immersed in intense spiritual sadhana, practice of austerities and meditation at his ashram in Pondicherry between 1923 and 1926, praying that God should take birth as this world for the spiritual elevation of mankind. On the 24th of November 1926, he emerged out of his samadhi, spiritual trance, and announced, yesterday, God incarnated himself on the earth. With his boundless divine powers, he will direct humanity's mind towards higher, nobler goals. In every heart, he will light a spiritual lamp. His godly voice will ring in the ears of the whole of humanity. It is clear from the date of incarnation mentioned by Maharshi Aurobindo that he was referring to Sri Sathya Sai only. Prophet Muhammad's disclosures were published in 25 volumes, 7 centuries after his death. The collection of those volumes is named the Ocean of Light. Several symbolic features by which the coming master of the world could be identified have been mentioned in volume 13, Medimud, meaning in Arabic, the great teacher he was promised. They are, he will have very thick hair on his head. His forehead will be broad. He will have a birthmark on his cheek. His face will always look clean-shaven. He will only wear a pair of clothes. His dress will be a flaming red colour. The colour of his face will sometimes look like copper, sometimes golden, sometimes brownish, and sometimes like the moon. His physical form will be small. His feet will be delicate, like those of a young girl. Right from the moment of his birth, he will carry all knowledge in his head. So also the entire corpus of the world's religion and precepts will be in him right from his birth. He can grant whatever one prays to God for. All the riches of the world will lie at his feet. He will go amidst his devotees, move among them, and touch their heads with his palm. Whoever sets eyes on him will experience supreme bliss. He will take residence on a hill. He will live for 95 years. He will fill the world with peace and tranquility. This Lord of the world will produce his own forms, symbols, out of his own body and his mouth. In this manner, as many as 27 references have been made which clearly and unmistakably apply to Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai. Nostradamus, the French futurist of the 16th century, wrote a book called Centuries, in which he wrote, "The coming ruler of the world will appear in Asia. The triplicity of waters will give birth to him. He will consider Thursdays as sacred. All the countries of the world will wonder at and admire him for his boundless wisdom and powers. From all parts of the world, people will come to honor him." The book of Revelations in the Bible describes the advent of the great master. An angel appears before John and reveals, "Behold a white horse, and he that sat upon it was called Faithful and True. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head are many crowns. He was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. Out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword." The embodiment of compassion and love, Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba has been so described in numerous religious treatises. 100 salutations to his lotus feet. Om Shri Sathya Sai Parabrahmane Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. End of chapter
4. बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय।